Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very, very much as always for taking the time to tune in. And today I'm delighted to be joined by founder and CEO of Shiageto Consulting, Faris Aranki, who is here to discuss his work in supporting teams to greater successes. I support a team that could really do with that, but we promise not to talk about that on this particular podcast. Having spent over 20 years delivering strategic change for the corporate and non-corporate worlds as a strategy consultant, director, educator and in-house strategist, Faris experienced firsthand the fine differences between strategic success and failure. His work has spanned numerous companies, from the smallest to the largest, in numerous countries across a range of sectors, including energy, banking, consumer goods, telco, media, government, automotive, and education. Wow. Supporting them all to unlock strategic success. Faris came to realise that often what hinders institutions from achieving their goals beyond the quality of their strategy, it is their ability to engage effectively with others at all levels and remove barriers in their way that can be the real barometers of success. This knowledge has formed the foundation of Shiageto's workshops, courses and methodologies. Faris believes that any firm or team can adopt these improvements. All it requires is a little of the right support. Faris, thanks a million for joining me today.
Well, Gary, thanks a million for reading that out. I must get my copywriters to edit it. But Gary, no, it's a real pleasure. I absolutely love your show and love spreading good ideas.
I love it. I really do. And I've been really looking forward to this one. Teamwork is something genuinely that is the maker or breaker of any organisation that I've been part of. So let's start with a little bit of your journey thus far, which is what I like to do in the beginning. Specifically, what would you say were the key parts of your journey that inspired you to eventually say, listen, I need to do something about this, and setting up Shiageto and figuring that out?
I guess, well, just to give the listeners, the viewers, a little very brief sort of history lesson about me, not anything magnet, bigger than that. My career spanned starting as a school teacher. Was my first career, 6 years in the classrooms, teaching in different countries, different cultures around the world. Then I worked for an oil and gas firm, so I got to know all about big corporate, and then I moved into strategy consulting, so got to work, with clients, but also working on very strategic thinking. And I guess the big epiphany was towards the end of that, where I sort of looked back and I'd written hundreds of strategies, probably about 150 strategies for different companies. In my career. And when I did an informal audit, 90% of them had not been implemented. Okay, not because they were the wrong strategy, but because the team we'd handed them over to, we made a massive assumption that they would get it, they would have the bandwidth, that they'd buy into it. But actually, most teams that we handed over had dysfunctionality. And unless we fixed that, we could hand them a blueprint for winning the lottery, and they wouldn't be able to follow it. And so my career became inched more and more to just fixing those problems because I was a natural at it. And that's what was the genesis for setting up Shiageto Consulting, because we go into teams and make them sharper. Shiageto is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone. Right? So we really challenge them and break their biases in real time to get that better engagement, that better thinking, that better focus.
Yeah. And prior to that, did you what sort of opportunities did you have within organizations to say, this actually is what you need? Yes, you need the strategy, but then you also need the support model. Did you have that prior to striking out on your own?
Not minimally, but often when you're hired as the IQ people, right, tell us what to do, that's the end of your input. Right, thank you, you've delivered the plan. Right, you go, well, hang on a minute, it comes with some caveats. So either they would just say, thanks, we've got it from here, or they wouldn't allow you, or you didn't have a platform to talk about it. Now, me being me, actually, in the last couple of years doing that, I really just moved across to fixing teams. And actually, I sort of, was being used by my firm to just go into the most difficult boardrooms and leadership teams and start fixing them. Get them to work better together was my remit. So, it's amazing. And there's a real lesson there about the platform that you have gives you this sort of entitlement or not. Otherwise, you have to be a really forceful character to break out of your box and say, no, this is what I'm going to do. And that was a lesson I learned early on in my career, funny enough, when I talk about the different stages of my career. Actually, that first transition I made from teaching into the corporate world was incredibly difficult, and I had to break out of my own box to make it happen.
Yeah, I love what you said there about the platform, because that's absolutely critical in your ability to be able to convey your messages, be heard and understood, be
Yeah,
respected, be listened to, and then have people take action on what that is that you're doing. And I guess at various points in your career, you would probably have more of that or less of that,
yeah,
and then you would have more or less effectiveness in terms of what it is you're trying to do. I always remember when I first went into what I would probably describe as my first corporate job. I
yeah.
worked when I was back home. I worked for most predominantly like council type organisations or city type organisations for folks in North America and such. And that was the way you did things, and there was admin and there was burden, but it worked to a degree. And then when I went into a for profit organisation, it was kind of madness, to be honest, because I was kind of thinking, but there was what my main from that first, what would that be, 4.5 years or so. The main thing that I ended up talking about towards the end of my tenure anyway was, I don't understand this. And I think this will speak to your experiences too. The competition and my understanding is outside, and I would mention the different organizations that were the competition. The competition is not supposed to be internal.
Yeah,
You're not supposed to basically go out of your way to completely inconvenience me or my team. And that's certainly not our remit and such. And I couldn't get to the spot where I understood the dynamics enough, and I
yeah,
didn't have that platform
yeah,
enough to be able to say this is madness. This
yeah,
is this is not the way. If the CEO heard about this and heard about the way that we're going about it, he would be appalled by that type and style of behavior. But it was just the way that we did things. So it was a very difficult transition for me, to echo and mirror your experience, but also one that was absolutely gold dust in terms of the way that I would try and set up my own platform to go forward to future successes.
yeah. I think you talk to most people out there, they will have a story that is similar. You know,
Yeah.
and what's interesting is I often, when I work with teams, I say very rarely do we meet people who intentionally want to trip each other up.
Yes.
It's not malice. It's not, yeah, there are Machiavellian people out there, but that's not the majority of us. It is usually through unawareness or incompetence that they're
Yeah.
doing it, right? And so give them a bit of slack, but equally identify it. Let's fix it, right? Because the more this persists, you're all gonna be dragged down by it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great point and a segue into what I wanted to ask you. What would you say would be the most common barriers between a solid strategic plan and then, the ultimate strategic success, which would be the ultimate goal?
I think number one is engagement, right? It's a bit like I said, you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if nobody cares about it, right?
Yeah.
If people don't see themselves in it, then it's nothing. It's just a piece of paper, right? It could be a very expensive piece of paper. So that's the single thing. And so many technical people or high IQ people assume because it's a great answer and it's shiny and it looks great that people will instantly go, great, I'm in.
Yeah.
But people aren't like that, right? They're more emotional than logical. And unless you take the effort to win over their emotions, it's just always going to be that piece of paper. And that's one of the single barriers that's, again, you could say it's laziness. They're not willing to put in the effort to sell the idea or get people engaged and speak. Or you could say it's unaware, they're unaware of it, that they need to put in all that effort. But that's what stops great ideas from great strategies from taking flight.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of a main mantra that I have in my life, which was a gift to me from an old neighbor, was people can put up with anything, almost anything,
Yeah.
as long as they know.
Yes.
And even if it's what they could perceive to be bad news, ultimately the end of the conversation would be, well, thanks for telling me, thanks for letting me know, not
Mm.
what I wanted to hear, but now I know. So with that mantra at the forefront of everything, when you speak about buy-in and you speak about investment and the ability to be able to deliver this, I think a lot of times, in my experience anyway, it's been, especially when I was managing projects and organizations, you would go along and sometimes have the assumption that everyone knows what you know. So
Mm.
then you go along saying, this is why the project is happening, this is why it's happening now, this is who is sponsoring it, this is what the ultimate end game is supposed to be, and this is why it's important. And a lot of times, again, kind of back to my earlier corporate days, I would go and then it would become very, very apparent very quickly. You haven't been told a thing about this, or what you've been told is completely the opposite of what we're actually trying to do here. So let me sit you down and tell you what I know. And
Yeah.
that became a very important strategic, lever for me to pull to be able to say, the first part of the conversation is, Faris, how much do you know about this? I
Yeah.
have a communication slide deck, but let me sit down and talk to you about this. And then eventually you go, oh, wow, no, that is not what I thought this
Yeah.
was,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we're having an educated conversation.
Yeah. 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 Just as you were telling that, I was thinking back to being a junior consultant, and I was working on this project for a company, and they'd arranged me to do some interviews with some senior staff. And I walked into this room with this lady, and I started going through the checklist of questions that I had, which were about this new product. What do you think about it? And she was really just bottled up, and she would monosyllabic answers. And after, I was like, this is weird. So after a few minutes, I said, sorry, can I just check? Why do you think you're here? And she said, this is to do with the redundancy program. My job's at risk. And so I'm not going to give you any answers because then you might fire me. And I was like, oh, no, I'm on this. And I was like, did nobody tell you? And she said, no, I was just told to turn up to this room at this time and meet with a consultant. And so after that, I never assumed the person sitting in me in the room knew and I'd always start with the objective of this meeting, or I am this person from this organization working on this. And it was, I'd say, more than a third of the time the person was unaware. And that just shocked me. That's just how frequently we go into conversations assuming the other person knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly, and I still see it today. So it's an issue that hopefully at some point through your ongoing work that you're doing with teams, that you'll be able to find that magic, process or potion or sauce or something to say this is exactly what it is. Because I think it's that it ends up becoming, sometimes it becomes that lazy thing, you're part of the same conversations I'm part of, you're part of the same email distributions, you're part of the same chat groups or whatever it is. So therefore, and understand exactly what's going on. I was actually chatting with someone just yesterday about everyone's experience is completely different, Faris. So even if someone says you got the memo, didn't you, or everyone got the email at the same time, or everyone was at that town hall, whatever
Yeah.
the communication vehicle was, you still have to do that follow-up afterwards to say, what did you hear? What did
Yeah.
it mean to you?
Yeah.
What do you think that looks like?
Yeah. Yeah. I do this quick little demonstration with groups of individuals, like teams. And I'll say, look, I'm going to read out a sentence, and I want you all to write down the number that you associate with what I just said. And then you're all going to reveal the number at the same time, right? And we're going to see if the numbers all match.
Oh,
And they all go, right. And I said, I'm only going to say 6 words, right? So there isn't a lot to be misinterpreted.
yeah.
And so I'll say, hey, everyone, it's probably going to rain tomorrow. And then I'll say, what percentage do you think it's going to rain? Write down the number now. And everyone, if I have a group of 10 people, pretty much certainly someone in the room will write 0% and someone will write 100%. And I'll say, wow, right, you've both taken a complete opposite ends of what I just said, the same 6 words, it's probably going to rain tomorrow. One of you will turn up with an umbrella and a raincoat and and the other one will just, happily think, and I'll assume as the leader, you were both briefed to the same level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So never assume even simple statements are understood by people in the same way.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? I've got another one that you can
Go for it.
that you can borrow, a very, very similar idea, and it's I'm going to give you a word,
Yeah.
and you're going to go into twos and just twos, and everyone goes into twos, when I put this word up, you write down every single word that you associate with that word.
Okay.
And you've got 90 seconds. It's very quick.
Beautiful.
And then after 90 seconds, you're going to compare your answers with your partner who will have done the same thing. And every exact match that you get 1 point. And then, but it can't be an or an ing or a s at the end or anything like that. It has to be an exact match. So 90 seconds, and the word can be kind of general, like quality or feast or famine or things like that, you know? And then you get everyone together. And over the years that I've done this, I love doing this, is that I'll start at 20. I'll say, right, okay, who's got 20? And you see everyone going, what? You know, their eyes go wide and they're like, what? 20? And they're looking around the room nervously. And I'm like, oh, okay. 15, the highest I've ever seen is 4. The highest I've ever seen is 4. And that's an anomaly because everyone, and then I say to them, it's a masterclass in the danger of misinterpretation in terms of communication. You were given the exact same information at the exact same time, and you were just paired up with someone who sat next to you. You might have a relationship with them or not, and then you still got 0, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, and it really hits home, and it is fun. But it's something that you can look upon it and say from a business context that how easily that could be done.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It really is.
I have a feeling we could just spend an hour just swapping little games like this. That where people are like, "Oh, I'm going to try that one. I'm going to try that one."
Yeah, exactly. And anyone who's listening and watching can absolutely use that one. I do love it. You could pick your own words. So back to the work that you're doing. You mentioned a couple of times already IQ.
Yes.
And when I was doing some preparation work and looking at your website, you know, you've got the IQ, EQ, FQ model. So I'm interested to know a wee bit more about that, and then how that actually influences ongoing strategic success within organizations.
Yeah, sure. So when we work with clients, we say, look, whatever your goal, right, you need these 3 pillars: IQ, EQ, and FQ. So we will start with, have you got a goal? And if not, let's spend time there, because having a really clear goal and not like a fuzzy goal, like we just want to be better. You know, we want to be a good company. What does that mean, right? Let's have a goal so we can measure success. In fact, anyway, spend time there. And I can talk a lot about that, why you should spend time there. But then to get there, you need the IQ. You need the best strategy, the best approach to get there, right? Not the first approach, not the first idea. That's the Achilles heel for a lot of firms. They just use old ideas or the first idea, the best idea. And the only way you know you've got the best idea is you've got to have at least 10 ideas. I actually actively encourage them to have 100 ideas and pick the best. Not 2 and pick the best, 100. So that's the IQ pillar. And we say, if that's wobbly, we'll fix that. But then the second one is, if you got your great idea, that's when you need the EQ. That's where it goes back to what we said earlier. Get the engagement. Do people care about your idea? Are they engaged in it? Are they excited? Do they collaborate around it? If not, fix that. But that's still not enough, because you can have a great idea and people engage. But if they're not focused, and that's what FQ is, the focus quotient, if they're not focused around that idea, then momentum will fade, interest will fade, right? And this happens time and time again in companies that are doing too many things. Yeah. And they'll go, but we had a great idea and everyone was initially really bought into it. Yes, but then they had their day job and 200 other exciting projects. So it just faded, or they got mixed messages around what was important. And so it just never took off. And it was the FQ that was the missing piece for me, because I met loads of great companies that had great buy-in, great culture. So I'm like, so why aren't they successful? They just didn't have that focus and discipline. And we tell companies it's like a bar stool, a 3-legged bar stool. One of these is always going to be shorter than the others. And so you're going to wobble, right? You need to fix that one first, right? Because what we see is, if they're a really smart company, if they have high IQ, they just double down on IQ. All you're doing is making that leg longer. It's going to be more wobbly. Or if they're really friendly, they'll double down on friendliness and EQ. I'm like, it's making it more wobbly. You need all 3. It is not, you substitute one for the other. And that's the bit that they really struggle with.
Yeah. And FQ, you know, relatively new concept to me, and it makes absolutely a ton of sense when you explain it like that. how do you lean into, how do you support organizations to lean in to that, to say, these are the multitude of things that are going to happen? And when you were mentioning them there earlier in terms of projects or
Yeah.
other exciting things, conceptually, academically, that makes a lot of sense to me, and experientially
Yeah.
too. But how do you then say, and this is what you need to do
Yeah,
when that
so very
happens?
practically, and it's really funny, Gary, because whenever I go around and give talk at conferences about FQ and stuff, and it's amazing how many people associate it with things like mobile phones. Oh yeah, my focus is terrible because I'm like, that's so low level, right?
Yeah,
Because let's start at the top of the pyramid. What we do is an audit of how many projects, strategic projects, a company is doing. We'll
right.
say, tell us about every strategic, not business as usual, something the way you've set up a project team, or it's an additional workload for a team to do this, to deliver, right? And it could be across any realm. It could be introduce a new IT system. It could be overhaul the recruitment process. It could be design a new product, right? How many of these are you doing, right? And it's amazing. First of all, they don't know.
Yeah,
And then they'll task someone to go and find out. And they'll come back and they'll go, I've counted 150. I'm like, you're probably missing another 150, right? Or you're prison. But 150, say that to yourself. Imagine it was your personal life. Would you do 150 new things at the same time? No, right? So we start there. Let's do an audit and let's rationalize that, right? I'm going to get you to make some tough choices because that's what you need to do as the leaders of this company.
yeah,
Because if you don't, people are making those choices on your behalf, your workforce. They're going, oh, well, I'm more interested in this one than this one, so I'm going to put more effort here, right? And when you've got a large workforce, that starts creating cracks and everyone... so don't open it to that, right? You are the one who is creating this havoc. So that's where we start. Yeah. And once we got that nailed, and I can talk about how we help them with that, it's then about, okay, look at your major projects, anticipate what's going to go wrong. Have a sort of a really pessimistic view. This is going to go wrong. Then remove those barriers. That's what really ruthless focused people do, right? They don't wait till they get to a barrier and and I often give a stupid example. I say, how many of us have been in an office where the printer doesn't work? Back in the days when we used it, right? And everyone goes up to the printer, the same thing happens. Everyone kicks it, everyone presses it. I'm like, that thing is probably sucking up hours of your company's time. And the simplest thing is just get a new printer, right? That is robbing you of FQ. And the first time someone complains that it's not working, just get a new printer. So now that's a really micro thing. There are much bigger things that fit into that same category that you can be doing to really remove the friction and just get people to, no, this is what you need to be working on. No, and that could be get rid of meetings that are unnecessary. It could be get rid of, all these things that are just chipping away at your focus.
yeah. And one of the things, talking about meetings, that's a perfect example. Over the years, in a multitude of organizations, meetings has bubbled up to be essentially, these are my words, not the organization's words, a gigantic waste of time. So there then becomes this effort to say we need to reduce the number of meetings, and then we need to be more pointed. So then you would maybe go into, for example, a boardroom, a meeting room, and there would be, back to what you were saying earlier, like, this is what the objective of this conversation is going to be. This is why you're here. This is what I'm going to talk about. And you get that opportunity. They would basically write down an agenda that would be like a little placeholder in the middle of the table. And then you would see a discernible change in behavior until you didn't. And then it would just creep back in again and creep back in again and creep back in again. And I think that's one of the things I struggle with. So I'd love to know how you combat that human tendency to revert back to areas of comfort or old habits,
Yeah.
in terms of the old habits die hard, to say, this is, and I'm just making this up now, but this is the cycle. You're going to get excited, you're going to do some really meaningful stuff, and then you're going to get complacent and you're going to have these bad habits that are going to be dragging you back. And this is what you have to do in those moments. How do you handle that?
So it happens time and time. It happens to us, right? So first of all, get the good behaviours ingrained, but do not rely on try and codify them, try and make them into a process. So have a rule from now on. This company does not run meetings where somebody cannot stand up and at the start of the meeting and say the objective of this meeting is X. Because if no one can do that, the rule is we cancel the meeting immediately. So put in rules. So don't leave it down to, the host is going to be a good host, so he'll make sure that. No, this is just the rule. This is how we do stuff here now, All right, codify it, put it in the rules. But even then, people are going to lapse. So, we encourage gamification, right? Have competitions, right? So take pride that you do this. So when someone new joins, we're going to take a meeting to explain how we run meetings. So you carry on and this what turns into your culture. This pride, this game. So we often use gamification and accountability and things in the start to make these habits and culture and values. And it's amazing how quickly they get coded into a business. But the biggest problem then is turnover of staff. Because if you turn over too quickly, that memory loss is. So there's also a factor around, how quickly you're onboarding people, how, what that onboarding process is. Because if that is skipped, then these bad behaviors creep back in, or a new culture will creep back in pretty quickly. So it's an ongoing, and this is what a lot of leaders or a lot of people struggle with. They go, I've fixed it once. Why do I have to fix it again a year later? Well, it's like all things, you've got to be constantly working on it.
Maintenance. So I imagine the majority, and I'm completely making this up, I just have an assumption that the majority of times that you're engaged, it's not when things are going absolutely perfectly and swimmingly well. It's when something has either completely broken or looks like it's getting to that stage. So you're then entering an organization that's already under duress and people are experiencing various forms of stresses and strains and emotional turmoil. How do you end up dealing with, and I know this is a very broad question, but genuine resistors to, you're just one more thing that I'm being asked to manage here. I can't cope with you. I can't handle you. I don't want to talk about gamification. I don't want to talk about any practices or processes or anything like that. I'm just doing what I can to survive here. How do you deal with the resistance factor?
Yeah. So like the FQ bit. So number one, don't add to their workload. Right. You're not going to engender yourself if you turn up and go, we're going to need extra meetings for this. So we always try to fit in exactly where they are. I'll say, you don't need any additional meetings. We'll just come and join your regular meetings. Doesn't matter what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to introduce new coaching sessions we're just going to, if we can't do it in the time that you already spent together, then it won't be done. Right. So I assure you, but you've also got to build up trust very, very quickly to allow you to have the remit to try things. Right. And you're right, Gary, if you give them labels, if you go in and say, I'm going to gamify they're going to switch off. Right. So I often don't talk about those things. I'm just here. Oh, I'm going to make one small change or run recommendation. Let's just try this. All right. Go with me for this one time. And it's got to show results or benefits pretty quickly. Right. I often talk about human beings are about whiffums and whammies. Right. Have you heard these phrases before, Gary? I see you smiling.
I've heard of whiffum. What's in it for me?
Whiffum, what's in it for me? Right. Every human being is self-interested. What's in it for me? Why should I care? Right. So, and the more you can give them their whiffums, the more they'll engage with you. But they also at the same time have whammies. What's against my interests? Oh, I don't like that. Oh, that means I'm going to have to work later. Oh, no. Right. Yeah. So whenever I meet a human being, in a business context, I'm trying to work out their whiffums and whammies, and usually people will give those to you in half an hour if you ask them the right questions. And so then in a meeting or when I'm working with a team, I just try and give as many whiffums as possible and avoid the whammies. And it's amazing if you do that and you've got a bit of trust and you're not adding extra workload, how people will go with it. Oh, well, that sounds fun. Yeah, I like fun. Oh yeah, okay, I'll try this new thing during the meeting. Oh, that means we finish the meetings 10 minutes earlier. I now like this, so I'm going to do this on my own free chord now in meetings. And that simple structure has allowed me to do some pretty wacky things with teams, which they've then gone, wow, I like this. This works. Even if Faris wasn't here, I'm going to still do this.
Yeah. It's building up that positive legacy. Once you're outside the building. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of longer term strategic investment, there might be some times I imagine where you say, look, you do have to have a pause. You do have to sit down and talk about this as a separate conversation because it's something that's materially holding you back. And I think back to my times in the classroom when I've been doing like basic project management training and saying, look, here are some core templates. If you don't have any templates at all, here are some core templates in terms of your project charter, in terms of your financial planning spreadsheet, in terms of
Yeah.
your status reporting and
Yeah.
whatnot, whatever that looks like. And then I can see the people, just really getting defensive, and kind of back to what I was saying earlier, you're asking me to do more work and I'm already buried. And I have to go on a little bit of a convincing campaign to say, you have to trust me on this. If
Yeah.
you try this and you consistently use this, you're not pushing any problems down the road. You're having educated conversations up front, and you're actually dissipating any potential resistance because you're dealing with things proactively. At some point you have to stop and do this instead of continuing to go
Yeah.
down the path as well. Do you see similar or
I see
similarities
similar
in
things, but
organizations?
I'm just going to challenge. I am often telling leaders, you've got to be the one that flexes, right? Because people are always like, often I get a leader say, I just want to introduce this new tool to the team, or this new template.
Yeah.
And I say, why? They go, well, it will streamline, it'll make more efficiency. I say, yeah, but it's a mini change program, right? What seems like a simple tool to you, and it may be the greatest tool in the world, is a change program to everyone in that team. So you're adding a new strategic initiative, even if it seems really small. So is it worth it? Are you going to get the benefit? Are you willing to fight to the death for this tool? Or is there a something that's not quite as good that you could use as a shortcut that they're already doing? Yeah. And they'll often go, well, we could just carry on using email instead of switching over to Slack. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, it may be more work for you, but why don't you do that? Right? To avoid this change program. So I'm always putting that quantifier, because I've seen so many people start off by going, it's a great tool, but they lose the team. And the more new tools or templates that you launch that don't actually get, taken on board by the team, the harder it will be to launch the next one, because everyone goes, oh God, it's another one of these things. So I'm always looking for the low, change program approach to anything. I'll say, you tell me what system you use. This was in my early days of facilitating. I used to go, okay, all my meetings must be on Teams, because I've learned every aspect of Teams, and I can run a really good meeting virtually on Teams. But then I realized I was spending half the meeting teaching people how to use Teams. Yeah. And we weren't getting through the content. So I was like, this is inefficient. So now I just rock up to Teams, go, what tool do you have? I then go away and learn it. And go, that is a far better leader thing to do, or EQ things to do. Me, I'll take the pain, so that because it's not a battle it was worth fighting for. There are other battles I'm going to spend my fighting currency for further down the line. So yeah. But other times you're absolutely right, Gary. It is worth introducing that tool. So use your currency, fight hard. But a lot of times, I reckon it's not worth the fight.
Yeah, do you know, it's a really good point that you raise. My angle at the time was, here are the basics of project management that you, based on the interactions we've had, that you're not using today, and you're kind of setting yourself up for failure, or at least at a single point of failure, and but not really sitting down. Difficult to do that in a class of 30, 35 people, to say what are the tools you're using. But that would have been a great question, because if someone says nothing, okay, you might want to think about this suite of very basic tools that will give you a good start. If some people say, we've got this, we've got that, okay, is there anything you can do to enhance it, to make it better and such like that? Because that, you're right, that resistance will be very, very difficult to overcome. Even if the leader does all the explanation and does a roadshow and does a demonstration and starts to use it, people, they whiff them, and the whammy, they would be kind of like, I'm not saying no, I'm saying I can't. There's just another thing that I have to do that's adding a wee bit of a burden. In terms of like the overall, if you were to kind of summarize one or two or three items that you would say are the most major barriers to teamwork today, what would you say those are?
If we look across the themes that we've talked about here, the major one is looking at the world through my own lens, assuming everyone has the same passions, understanding, focus as I do. Right? That's what causes major trip ups. Like, as you said, as our example about the words, people get a different interpretation about the, as we just talked about, the passion for a tool. Just because you're passionate does not naturally mean the next person is passionate about it. All right? Just because you think something's important doesn't mean somebody else thinks it's important when it comes to FQ. So the more you take time to stop and clarify that between two people, that's something that will instantly improve every team across each of those dimensions we talked about. But a lot of people skip that because they see that as unnecessary, or they're an autopilot, or they're moving at pace. But if they don't, it kicks the problem down the road. Right. So the simplest, stupidest things I get teams, and I will start off with teams and I say, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff you already know. And you're going to go, why are we paying this guy to tell us? The difference is I'm going to make you do it because you know it, but you're not applying it. And the single greatest thing I can do here is help you apply it. It's the same reason you hire a PT at the gym. You know you should go to the gym. You know you should. But by having the PT there, he actually, or she makes you do the exercises in the correct format. Right? So don't rush too far ahead. Slow down. Right, ask the right questions, listen to the answers. That's the bit a lot of people forget to do. And so much will be improved because of it.
And you're right. I mean, it sounds so basic. And I wonder why, I know you've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I wonder why people genuinely skip that. Is there a common theme of they are too busy, you've been here for a while? And the reason I ask that is that recently I've been having a couple of conversations in different formats, or on different topics, I should say, about, the longevity versus experience. And if someone's been in an organization for, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I say, well, Faris should know that. He's been here for 5 years. And then that's my assumption, that's my paradigm, that's my lens. And then I move forward with that assumption without checking and saying, in your 5 years that you've been here, Faris, have you done this? Have you been exposed to this? Do you have any experience in this whatsoever? And you say, actually, no, here were the roles that I've performed in this 5-year period. So that it became this blocker of tenure versus experience. And what I've found, and I haven't really got a resolution to this yet, but what I'm finding and have found thus far is that there's a stubbornness that goes with that, where people are like, no, 5 years, and I'm using that number, but 5 years, he should know it. And therefore, I'm not going to explain to him what his job should be. And I'm thinking, you need to be a bit more pragmatic and generous.
It's two sides of the same coin. We use something like tenure as a lazy approximation, but we do it because it helps, because we can't sit down and interview everyone and work out what they know. Maybe in the world of AI now, we can keep an actual, up-to-date log of what everyone's experience is and knowledge is, and that can actually be a really good thing, right? But before then, we have to make assumptions and move quicker. So we use something like tenure, which does allow us, but at the same time, therefore, creates these problems because we go, particularly when we then back it up with stubbornness. And we're rigid on the rule. Well, we're using tenure, but hang on, that was just a proxy. We can't make hard and fast rules around proxies. That we forget that part. So the human brain is amazing. It engineers itself to move at speed, so it sort of automates decision making.
Yeah.
But then that's where it trips itself up. Because when you really need to think about it, it's lazy. One of my favorite authors is Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. What I'm really doing with teams is slowing down their thinking more often. Because if they are thinking fast all the time and on autopilot, that's where stuff goes wrong. I assume Gary knows that. I assume this project's already been done. I assume that it's actually good to move slowly at times to make sure of things.
Yeah, slowing down to speed up eventually. So you mentioned briefly there AI.
Yes.
How do you see in your type and style of work AI complementing and possibly complicating the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, right? If first of all, AI, let's take the 3 pillars. AI, when it comes to IQ, phenomenal. Suddenly, your IQ is extrapolated. You have access, not just knowledge, but I say one of the hardest parts of the IQ pillar is generating new ideas, right? But now you're never alone. Say whatever topic, hey, I want to launch my product in America. Tell me 100 ways I could do that.
Yeah.
Suddenly you've got those 100 ideas and you can then assess them. Whereas before you were just relying on your brain going, well, I know this one way to do it. I know the second way, right? So AI in the IQ pillar, phenomenal, right? You can even ask it, what are we missing? Here's our plan, feed it in. What are we missing? You're missing these 70. So, but IQ in the EQ, sorry, AI in the EQ pillar, terrible, right? Because what's happening is people, and it's not just AI, it's technology, people are having asynchronous conversations. So they're losing the ability to say to another human being what they really think in real time and have difficult conversations. And actually, we're seeing more and more of our work in that space where actually what's the problem in teams is they just don't know how to deliver bad news without falling apart and hating each other or taking it really personally because of AI. Because, AI doesn't get upset with you. AI delivers things and technology. I can easily text you a message about how angry I am, but tell you the same message to your face in real time. So I'm going to avoid that. Or I'm going to go back to my desk and send you an email telling you what I really thought. Wow, how bad is that, right? That's going to make it 10 times worse. So in the EQ, we find is getting less and less because of technology, and AI is accelerating that. Great for my business, terrible for the human race. And then AI, when it comes to FQ, it can go either way. It can make you ruthlessly efficient by reducing, some of your task load because you're passing it on to AI to do. But equally, as shown by doom scrolling, right? If you're not using the tool well, it can be a massive distraction and take you off on tangents. So it's really how you sort of make use of that tool. But yeah, a tool is just a tool. It's what you use it for is the impact it'll have.
Absolutely. And there's an absolute level of intentionality to that, and I think one of the benefits of AI is, to the majority of the world right now, it's still this new thing, certain sectors maybe not. So you have that opportunity to say, right, okay, how do I want to find out about this? How do I want to know and understand this? How do I want to use this? How much time am I willing to do that? And what happens if I feel like I'm getting sucked in? And then doing the AI version of doom scrolling and such, and I would encourage people. I hope that people take that opportunity to do it with intention rather than just jumping in and then in X amount of time later saying, I'm completely lost. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I should be doing. I don't know if it's actually me that thinks this, or it's just my device that's telling me that I think this, and I'm completely out of any realm of reality that I'm hoping to be in. So it's certainly food for thought going forward as to what that looks like.
100%. It's still to be played for. That's the good news, right? It hasn't. Right? But if you don't get on board and do it intentionally, it will sweep past you like many other things in life, and you will end up where it wants you to end, or other people want you to end up, not where you want to end up.
Yeah, 100%. So as you know, Faris, this is called the Best You interview series, and I like to take this opportunity to ask every guest, what regular practice do you employ that gives Faris the best opportunity to be the best version of himself?
I do. You won't be surprised, Gary. I do a variety of things. I guess the things that I do that makes me be the best version of myself, and is tied into a lot of our conversation, right, is I constantly challenge myself. Because you can get overconfident in your abilities, but also I find that the more times you challenge yourself, and it's the old step outside your comfort zone, I do it in micro ways so that when a big change or challenge comes, I'm more prepared for it. So what do I mean by that? Every month, Gary, I'll set myself a stupid challenge, right? And it might be something like, this month, I'm right-handed, I'm just going to brush my teeth with my left hand. Right? This month, I'm not going to use Google Maps. Right. This month, I'm going to learn a month of Japanese every day, right? Just to stretch my brain and so it gets comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it doesn't matter if I achieve it or not. It's that constant sort of thing, because I know the benefit that does, and that kind of extrapolates into other things. Right? Every week, I'll set aside time to meet random new people, for example. So. Now, I'm not saying to people listening that you have to adopt my approach to life, but this is what I do to be the best version of me.
Yeah, I love it. And you're experiencing that constant growth,
Yeah,
each and every day. And as you say, then when it becomes the actual changes and such, you're the one that's the cool head or the calm persona. They're saying, we'll figure out what it is and we'll move
yeah,
forward from here. Yeah,
yeah. So
fabulous.
yeah.
I love it. So where can people find out more about you and Shiageto?
Yeah, well, come and visit Shiageto's website, shiageto.com. I'm sure we'll put that in the note. Or come and find me personally. LinkedIn's a really good place. I spend a disproportionate amount of my time there. I post every day, little tips around IQ, EQ, FQ, and what's going on in my life. And I answer every DM. So come and find me, come and connect, come and follow, and we'll carry on the conversation.
Perfect. Faris, my friend, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I had a great time today. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Gary.